All right, got a little informational video for you today. Before we get started, as I always say, check out our belts. Got the best belt on the planet in our opinion. Continue to make improvements, get better and better. Can-Am, Polaris, which is what we're going to talk about today, but check them out on the website. So something I just thought of that might be of interest to any of you Polaris and Can-Am owners who are considering one vehicle or the other, or jumping ship and going to the other, was Polaris versus Can-Am on clutching and clutches. Now the difference between clutching and clutches is that the clutches are the clutches themselves, and clutching is flyweights, helix, springs, etc. So that's the difference on clutching and clutches. Let me start off on the number of tools you have to do general maintenance on clutches. Now, for the win, for sure, is Polaris, because all you really need is a clutch puller to get your primary off and a spring compressor to get a secondary apart, change a secondary spring and all, and then you can use that compressor to, change your spring and flyweights in your primary clutch. So it's that on tool side, money spent on tools and number of tools, Polaris hands down. We own all of the Can-Am vehicles that have all the modern UTV clutches and OG Mavericks, all the way up to a P-Drive X3. That's one we do not have. We have all other clutches. And just the sheer number of tools that you have to do simple clutch kits on the Can-Am clutches is a pretty big list, and they're not cheap, I'm staring at I don't know if you can't see it in the picture here, but staring at the primary clutch that come off our 22 Commander, same as an X3. Well, you need a clutch puller to get it off, and you're gonna have to have a governor cup tool to separate the two halves, and then a spring compressor to change the spring in it if you were doing a complete clutch kit or getting it apart. And then torquing the Can-Ams is super critical as compared to the Polaris, and I'm not going to say it's not critical, but I used Impact for years and got away with it. On a Can-Am, I wouldn't do that. So then you got to have a holding tool to do it. So from a tool standpoint, Polaris wins hands down. Now, we'll skip over and give a win column for Can-Am. Reliability-wise, from the factory, as is, bone stock, all of that, I think that Can-Am does a better job on clutch calibration and reliability, if you leave it alone and don't go crazy on mods. I think hands down they're more reliable, just harder to work on. For a fact, I know they're more reliable. The second thing is between Polaris and Can-Am is that alignment. Alignment's not an issue on a Can-Am like it is a Polaris. Why? Because the way that Can-Am connects their transmission, transaxle, gearbox, whatever you want to call it, to the engine is 4 bolts on most models with some alignment pins, so that when they mate, that's it. There's no movement, versus Polaris uses these 6 big bolts with a couple of brackets. They get loose, bolts break, etc., and they can move and turn. That's why we sell an alignment tool for the Polaris, and Can-Am doesn't need one. I guess strike that one, to add that one, or whatever you want to call it, back to Polaris, it needs alignment tools. So I'm gonna get 3 essential tools, but they're not expensive either. Like these governor cup tools here, 200-something bucks. All right, so reliability-wise from the factory, my opinion, and also the way that manufacturer sets them up for stock unit, I'm going to have to say Can-Am does a better job. Now this is not a overall vehicle comparison. We're just talking about clutching. Belts, belt choices, or belt dimensions. Technically, a lot of people don't realize this, on most of your Polaris is 900s, 1000s, not turbos, but 900s and 1000s, Generals, 1000Ss, XP, can all use the same belt. Polaris just doesn't choose to because they save money on making thinner belts and etc. Can-Am, on the other hand, uses dimension-wise just one belt. I believe that one belt, it's been a while since I looked at everything, but it goes from, well, the older belts like a OG Maverick or whatever, from a 500 ATV all the way through the 1000 Maverick and Commanders. And then the newer X3 style is one dimension belt for all the more modern vehicles, Defenders, the newer Defenders, Trails, Mavericks, Sports, all that, 1000R, X3s, same dimension belt. Once in a while, Can-Am will use a cord in their belt called Zytail, and that versus Kevlar, and they think it's better. It's really a really tough material, but I don't know that it really offers a CVT belt that much of an advantage. Gets a different part number, but still same dimension belt. So simplicity on belt wise, Can-Am. If you had most of these vehicles in Can-Am, you could grab two belts and cover just about everything they make. And if you wanted to stick with Polaris dimensions, which we don't necessarily, you'd have to have 3 or 4 different belts and your toolbox to cover all of them. Or if you had a small shop, you'd have to carry more. So belt-wise and simplicity-wise, win goes to Can-Am. Overall belt usage or reliability, I don't have nearly as much experience for the Can-Am side as I do the Polaris, but as a general rule, I'm going to say, based on my limited experience with Can-Am and exhaustive experience on Polaris, Can-Am edges out Polaris, and once again, in stock vehicles, belt reliability, burning belts, slipping belts, etc. You know, why is that? I don't think that the clutches in the Polaris are that bad. Yet at the same time, they do have some bad designs. And of course, here at Hunterworks, we obviously are fixing problems and with Polaris clutching, and we have most of them figured out, not the turbos, but the non-turbos have them figured out. We got better choices, and we can fix them. And once you fix them, well, now they're as reliable as the OEM Can-Am ones. Now, the aftermarket has not jumped on the Can-Am side as much as the Polaris in far as some of the cast pieces and etc. So you'll spend less money, and I guess this is a plus for Polaris. You're going to spend less money on a replacement aftermarket clutch on Polaris versus Can-Am. You're going to have to just about go to a billet clutch, over $1,000, or go back OEM and they're $1,000. So price-wise for replacement, Polaris, you know, gets the win on that. I guess the good news is you don't have to buy them as often. So what is lifespan, you know, on clutches? My general rule here is on Polaris, OEM brand, not Hunterworks brand, but OEM brand, if you get 2,500 to 4,000 miles out of a primary, you did good. That's average lifespan. I have a general answer that says you get 5,000 miles out of any clutch, of any brand, Polaris or Can-Am, you got your money's worth out of it. Now, it doesn't mean that yours is wore out if you got 5,000 miles. It just means that as a general rule, because we have people that can't get 1,000 miles because of the way they drive, and we got people who can go 10,000 miles. However, we're just talking about averages and in general. You know, so there are differences between them, as we've mentioned already. More tools for Can-Am, more reliability. However, you know, I'll pick on Can-Am. Some of their freaking designs for two-piece clutches, I'm not a fan of two-piece clutch, and I give that win back to Polaris. You know, we got to have this stinking governor cup tool to separate the two halves of the newer X3 style primaries, and then our Defender, you got to stick a clutch puller in there and get a big old 2-pound hammer and whack it, separate it. I'm not a fan of two-piece. And OG Can-Ams, you know, where they literally, and the Outlanders, where you take the bolt out and this half comes off, and that's why torquing a Can-Am is so critical, because these parts got to lock back together, and if you don't torque them right and they turning, then it's a problem. Of course, for the X3 style primary clutch that's got a square on the end. That's not an issue, but point is, I'm just not a fan of the two-piece, but once it's together, and once it's together right, it seems to be more reliable. So these are just some differences, you know, and if you stuck a gun to my head on vehicle-wise, you have to keep in mind, or maybe you don't know, we have what we call a farm. I don't know why we call it a farm. We're not raising anything but trees and deer and fish, but we use three Rangers now, and a Defender, and also a new Commander XMR. My go-to vehicle is, because I'm a wuss these days as I get older, is our Defender Limited with the cab. I like the air and the heat. However, you know, when I'm ready to work, just jump in and go, and don't fool with doors. I jump on our Ranger, 17 Ranger 1000. So it's kind of a toss-up. I prefer the Limited. It is quiet in there. Reliability for me, overall vehicle, I've never really had any problems with any Polaris. I mean, we've had some with a couple thousand miles on them. I ain't had any problems. So I'm not gonna sit here and get involved in a manufacturer's war, you know, the old Chevy versus Ford debate. That's not for me. I like them both. They all have their pluses and minuses. However, I will say a negative on Rangers, and particularly, is some of the new XP 1000s and the non-XP 1000s, especially non-XP 1000. It just don't have very good quality clutches. And we either, depending on when this video is made, we either presently have a Deer clutch system for it, and hopefully another alternative from Hunterworks, and the future for it. So just weigh your options. Like I said, I thought this may be just some good information to share with people based on our experience, what we see here. You know, continue to shoot me them emails. Let me know of things that need correcting and fixing. We'll continue to do what we do, and try to make you some tools, you Can-Am guys, that are a better quality tool and hopefully less price to get the job done. But we appreciate you so much.